Russia continues to move troops and tanks to its western border with Ukraine. Russia could also be moving troops to neighboring Belarus to attack Ukraine from the north. Retired Air Force General Philip Breedlove was one of 6 geographic combatant commanders and Supreme Allied Commander of NATO. He's currently Distinguished Chair at the Middle East Institute and Professor at Georgia Tech. General, welcome to the program.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So it looks like several rounds of diplomacy have failed. What options are there to deter Russia?
Well, you're correct. It looks like that to this point, those talks have failed, but I don't think it's time to give up on them. I agree with Secretary Blinken. There is still time to try to work this out. It really boils down to what Mr. Putin wants to accomplish. He's assembled a force for a purpose to try to bend the West to meet his demands, and we'll see how it goes from here. As far as further deterrence, we have taken a path of sort of spoken deterrence to this point. We've done fairly little actual movement of capability, etc., as far as a more physical deterrent. And so there are still options.
So what do you mean, General, by a physical deterrent?
Well, for instance, some, and I'm not proposing them, but some have proposed troop movements. The president has clearly taken troops to Ukraine off the table, but troop movements to other places in NATO to reinforce our allies, to be ready if there's any spread of the conflict that Russia seeks to engage in, etc. So there are plenty of options out there. And I must say that some talk about no troops in Ukraine, but we've had troops in Ukraine for a long time. We have a long-standing training detachment at Yavriv training grounds and other places. So this is kind of a bit of a play on words.
Ukrainian intelligence is reporting that Russia has been moving stockpiles of ammunition, field hospitals, and security services to the border. Do you think that means that they're ready to attack and they're not bluffing?
Well, clearly they have been doing that also in the past, but what we see now is a little bit more of a logistical push that would bring the enablers that Russia would need to actually invade if they wanted to, or we should, I think, to be correct, say re-invade, as Russia has already invaded Ukraine twice in the past, and so the recent past. And so I think that these movements of logistical capabilities are being reported by more than just the Ukrainian military.
You were the Supreme Allied Commander of Europe, the SACEUR. Did you have any interactions with President Putin?
No, he wouldn't even remember. I shook his hand once and didn't even say his name. We were at the 70th anniversary of Normandy at Sword Beach during a huge celebration of that great event, and I was sitting right behind him. But no, I've had no personal interaction with Mr. Putin.
Take us through a scenario, General. What happens if Russia invades Ukraine? Should there be a military response, or should it just be sanctions and diplomacy?
Well, I'm not going to be in the business of advising our government. Let's just look back at how things have played out in the past. In 2008, Russia invaded Georgia, and they still occupy South Ossetia and Abkhazia. They still occupy a huge chunk of Georgia. And the West really did not respond in stringent ways. Lots of condemnation, sanctions, and the things that we normally do. But what we see now is that has not changed Mr. Putin's behavior. In the fall of 2013 and the spring of 14, Mr. Putin invaded Ukraine twice. Russia still occupies Crimea, and Russian forces are still in the Donbass, propping up the proxy forces there and giving them sustenance and supply. So what we have seen in the past is that this sort of coercive diplomacy and sanctions have not worked. They have not changed Mr. Putin's behavior at all. And I think it's pretty much human behavior, isn't it? If you reward bad behavior, what do you expect to get more of? Bad behavior. If you've ever raised a 2-year-old, you know how this works. And so what we have done in the past has not worked. And now we need to examine other avenues of how to attack this. We have all manner of government tools, diplomatic tools, informational tools, military tools, and economic tools. And it seems with Russia, all we are apt to use are economic sanctions. I think we should begin to look at the other tools of state.
So what do you think about the role NATO should play in a potential military response?
Well, first of all, we are a part of NATO. So this is a royal we. So when we talk about NATO, it also talks about us. And I do believe that Article 3, everybody always wants to talk about Article 5 when it comes to NATO, but Article 3 in short-term Georgia boy parlance says defense begins at home. And so I believe that our European allies, friends, and partners need to be looking hard at what's happening in their backyard. And are we going to accept now, as we have in the past, are we going to accept now and into the future that Russia can use its land military force to change internationally recognized borders in the Eurasian landmass? Because that's what we've accepted to this point.
All right. Well, General, I appreciate you being with us on the program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and Godspeed our great nation as we try to navigate these waters.
Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel so you don't miss out on any future Government Matters interviews.